today we are talking about website security. Obviously, we're going to be talking a lot about WordPress because it's generally one that, while it's very open, it also means that it's more open to vulnerabilities and other issues. But I think a lot of the principles that we're going to talk about today with WordPress is going to transcend to pretty much whatever platform you're on. But yeah, WordPress is a good one to kind of use as a jumping off point. Anyway, my name is Phelan at Seymour Digital Media.
And I'm Greg McKinnon with Original 72 Creative.
Awesome. And so why we kind of like to do I think once a year we're pretty much talking about this because there's always different parts of security, and it's one that I know you and I have run into with clients. There's always some sort of security issue with some client. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I would say the first place to kind of get started with that, talking about that, is the making sure your plugins are up to date. I think that is a big one that tackles like a lot of the issues that you're going to run into.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty much I would say 85 to 90%, maybe even higher, that someone gets hacks your site or is able to get in through some vulnerability by unpatched theme or
Mm-hmm.
plugin or WordPress itself. So, um, top of the list, obviously, is to keep your WordPress up to date, keep your themes up to date, and keep your plugins up to date. If you do that simple process, you will be doing yourself a big favor by keeping yourself already at that 90% um, safety level just in
Yeah.
that simple process.
Oh yeah, yeah. I absolutely like because most people that do have a website, like you're not going to be individually targeted, which is a much more difficult situation to be in. Is if like a person is going after your website specifically, like that's a much tougher, has many different aspects that you would have to deal with. But most people, they're just one URL on a big spreadsheet that the hackers are just trying to go your domain slash WP ad login or admin to just try to like see if you're a WordPress website. That's the first one. So most people, it's just you're just getting swept up in a net, and most of those attacks can be solved by just keeping your plugins up to date. If you want to get fancier, you could do something like the get the word fence, and we have certain clients that they've changed the WP login to some other name, just so that if they go sweep through, they just get counted as not being WordPress, and so they get left alone.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah, and so yeah, that is definitely a good one. I don't do it on a lot of sites because I find people um, get really tripped up on like where do I go, even though
yeah,
it's like just go here. Like you,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
everybody in the world just knows to go to WP-admin, and when you change that on someone, they for some reason really get tripped up over it.
yeah, yeah.
So
I,
I
I
get questions all the time with people like that. What was my login again? So I have to tell them over and over again. Like, why can't you just bookmark this, please? Like, it's not difficult.
yeah, yeah. It's definitely one. Yeah, clients get really weird if you change like kind of like a little bit in their user flow that they just fritz out and just have a hard
The
time with
other
it.
thing, along with changing the default login, which is highly recommended, because that's like every person trying to get into a WordPress site knows the admin is at WP
Yeah.
admin. So you type that after your domain, you'll find it, right? So if you eliminate that, that's huge. The other thing is changing the default admin user that gets created
Mm.
in WordPress, because probably first or second after the finding the login is them trying the default admin user that typically always gets created for a WordPress site. So eliminating that as well will help with people just trying to find that and try to, brute force password to get access to your site.
Yeah, yeah, and that also leads me to another one. It's like having like word fence, a plugin or something like that that limits the number of attempts that people can make before there's a lockout. I know there's some hosting, like we have some clients on Flywheel, which is part of WP Engine, and so they by default limit the number of times you can try, which
Mm-hmm.
also helps with those brute force attacks where they're just basically like slamming it a million times, and if you just say three times and then you're locked out, I think that goes a long way
Yeah,
to
there's a really good plugin for WordPress that does just that. Like if you
yeah.
don't have a security plugin, like we might get into in a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
specific to doing a bunch of these things, there's one called limit login attempts, and that will basically take care of the amount of times that people are able to attempt to log in and ban them if they go over that.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, if you have nothing else, at least use that. But there, in the other plugins that we get into for more heavy duty security, they have like all of these things, and that's one of them. But limit login attempts is just for that.
Yeah, yeah, and it's definitely one I've seen on a couple of our clients' websites, and super helpful, especially if they do run into like people brute forcing, and like it's just going to save you so much headache in the long run. It's to do these kind of basic setups that just break down what people are doing. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Another one I wanted to talk about, we talked about in our prep, was making, if you can set up two-factor authentication, do set it up. It
Mm-hmm.
can be a bit annoying, but annoying things mean that it's harder for hackers to get around them or people trying to take advantage of your website. That little bit of inconvenience for you is a big inconvenience for them. And also, if you can do it with like an app on your phone as the authentication, do that. Google has a really good one, Google Authenticator. I use it for all my major, any of the really critical systems.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely have it that set up that way. Those
Mm-hmm.
are really, they're nigh impossible to break because basically
Mm-hmm.
you would need to break into Google. Oh, which actually reminds me, Google is the only one of the major tech companies that never has had a hack. It's a weird fun fact about theirs, and it's because everyone that works there has to carry a physical like USB,
Mm-hmm.
and so you have to plug that into the computer you're working on, and then log in from that computer. And you need both your login and that physical dongle, and you can't. And it's not the same as an RFID, so you can't scan it because that's how other people do it. Like companies will have people physically break into the building by like finding out where people go for lunch, sitting next to them, scan their key card that's just hanging there, and then break into the building physically that way. And so there's, yeah, but you can't do that with a USB key. So it's kind of,
Yeah, I wonder how many headaches they have every day of people. I lost my dongle.
oh yeah, no, absolutely. There's probably, uh, yeah, well,
Annoying for them, but secure.
yeah, exactly. Like
Yeah.
when you have like a track record like they do, then you can kind of say like, yes, this is annoying, but look at our track record, and then it shuts everyone up to kind of the security risk. But yeah, it's definitely two-factor authentication. Strongly could not recommend more.
Yeah, for sure. Two-factor authentication, as well as enabling hardened passwords, so people can't use the password, for instance.
Yeah,
It has to require an uppercase, a lowercase, a
yeah,
digit, a symbol, and it has to be a certain length. That as well. Um,
yeah.
like I was saying off the top, like the things that we've gone over, you've already gotten to probably 98%
Oh yeah,
security of
yeah.
of your WordPress site just by doing, and they're not difficult things to do. So there's really no excuse for people, not to do these things. I did want to mention, outside of WordPress and the software and
Mm-hmm.
updating the themes and things, it's also really important to make sure that your PHP would be up to date to the most recommended version.
Yeah.
If you're running outdated versions of PHP, there could also be exploits just from that outside of getting in through your WordPress site. There would be other ways that you might be exploited.
I would even go further than there could be vulnerabilities. There will be vulnerabilities if you have.
Well, yeah, yeah, there
it's
will
it's
be, yeah, for sure.
well, and I only joke about that because like PHP is notoriously a language that is both very simple to learn and very simple to hack. It's like it's got
But
the
the reason why I said it the way I did was because you could be on not the current version and have had a security update done to it. So
yeah
it's only out of life PHP versions that wouldn't be getting these security updates. So once your PHP version is out of life, at least make sure you're at a version that is still being maintained and updated.
yeah
Um, Versus being on the bleeding edge or the current version, just make sure you're on a version that is not out of life and not getting any security updates anymore.
I no, I totally agree with you. I was just being a little like reminding people that PHP, while it's very useful as a coding language, it's also very vulnerable and has a lot of well-known security issues that it has to deal with as like just a
Yeah,
coding language in general. So it's definitely one that that's why there's so many updates for it is because that it really likes telling the world what your database says. Like
hmm
it's
hmm
quite insistent on SQL injections if you let it. Um,
yeah. So on top of all of those basic things that do get you to that high level, there are other smaller things to get you the rest of the way. And typically, these things are easiest to be done through a security plugin. So the two security plugins that, well, there's one that I use, but there's two that are sort of at the forefront of what people use for security. The one I use is Solid Security,
mm,
formerly called iThemes Security. iThemes rebranded to Solid, so now all of their products are Solid Security, Solid Backups, Solid Central, all these kind of things. The second one is WordFence, which is I think probably the most used
I would think so.
because Solid Security is a well, there's a free and a paid, but I think WordFence is probably the best known and most used.
Yeah, that's what that I think when I looked it up, it was like the most installed of any of the security plugins.
Yeah,
Um, it's really well known. It's definitely has a lot of. I mean, even if you just have like the free tier, it still does a lot, just like without
yeah.
even activating the license. So it's well worth it to just install.
Yeah, so again, both of them have free, both of them have pro paid versions, but
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes the free version does probably up to 99% of what you might need.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the things that you're going to find in these security plugins are basically an easy way to do and set up a lot of the things we've already talked about, hiding the WP admin at a different address, setting so that all of your passwords need to be difficult, doing the two-factor authentication. Basically, everything we've gone over, they all will allow you to set them up very easily. Some of the additional things that you can do in there, which I would recommend, are disabling the XML RPC protocol. um, if you're not going to use that, then you might as well just disable it. And most people don't use it. Another thing is
Just
the
quick, which one is the XML RPC? When would people be using that? Just so we're clear for that part.
yeah, basically, it's a protocol that will extend and allow third party connections to your site so you'd be able to use maybe some interface on your phone to connect to WordPress and do things. It's used for hooks, oftentimes, like for pulling real time shipping
Mm.
rates from a shipping provider. If you're running
Mm.
WooCommerce,
Okay.
they will have hooks, and the XML RPC allows for the connection to your site to be able to, inject the information for that third party software. So
Hmm.
that's the function that has.
Yeah. Okay. I just yeah, I wanted just to clarify it just so that people, in the audience, if they're like, do I know if I need to do this or yes or no? And so
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you could disable it, and if something you're trying to do on your site all of a sudden isn't available anymore,
yeah.
you can disable it. But for the most part, if you have just a basic WordPress site, brochure
Yeah.
site, you can disable it, and most people don't need it.
Mm.
It is a more advanced thing for more complex sites. So.
Yeah. Makes
Um,
sense.
Something else that it does very easily is it will harden and um, take away the ability to um, access files or write to files like your WP
Oh yeah.
config. So you can secure essential files that often get exploited, so that can't happen. I don't know how many people know or notice this, but there is a way in WordPress, if you get access to WordPress, you can go and look at the theme files and actually change the theme files right within an editor in the admin.
Yeah.
And oftentimes that is a highly suggested item to disable. So both of these security plugins have checkboxes and sections like, do you want to secure this? Do you want to secure that? Check this off, check that off. And these are a lot of those things that it goes through and takes away the ability to be used.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. I mean, I will say that I use that editor feature a fair bit for some of my clients that have like, we've got a custom coded theme, and I put my head in my hands and go, great. And then I use the editor to just quickly look over the files. But yeah,
I
definitely
mean,
I
it's
disable.
it's so dangerous because you make one typo, like
Yeah. Yeah.
for like coding typo in a file and save it, and you could, the site could be down. And now, assuming that most people do that because they don't have FTP access to the server files or something
Yeah.
along those lines. So if that happens, all of a sudden you're like, it's down, and now I have absolutely no way to
Yeah. Yeah.
recover this quickly.
Yeah, the backups are your friend. That's another thing. Is
Yeah, yeah.
always having a backup of the website. But yes, I've may or may not have done that by accident a few times. Or I went, what happens if I remove this snippet? And then the like, oh, that broke the page. Okay, just gonna put that little snippet back in there.
Reverse, reverse.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, it got me thinking, like a little Proustian reverie of talking about people writing stuff to the database. Oh, it was one of the first hacks of a website. I don't know if you've ever seen it, the Japanese car part hack.
Mm.
So what happens is through your contact form, they
Mhm.
inject themselves. They do a SQL injection and I guess get logins and then write to your database a little PHP file, and so the website goes down. Like as soon as it loads, it goes down and it's replaced by this like Japanese parts importer. It's all in Japanese. It's like pink and it has car parts all over it. It was. I mean, it was like almost 10 years ago that I dealt with that. But yeah, it was definitely a fun one to make you go through each file and figure out like why is this happening. And then I figured it out, and they wrote a PHP file in it and said when the page loads, load this instead of the website.
Mhm.
And so yeah, that's why secure. Oh, that also reminds me, we forgot the most basic thing for this as well. Make sure you have an SSL certificate for your website. There,
Yeah.
sorry, it's just so basic that I was like, and I'm right now in the middle of actually generating one and on a website that's hosted on AWS. and so I'm having to go through that. And so it just came back to me that I'm like, yeah, make sure you have your secure your website, because if you log in and you're not secure, that means your username and password are flowing across the internet that anyone can go see because it's not
Yeah,
encrypted.
for sure. It's not that I forget. I always remember, but I also sometimes think, well, who doesn't have an SSL these days? Like
Yeah,
everybody, like it's been such a standard for so long, ever since Google was like, we're going to show a warning if you don't have an SSL in your site is not going
yeah,
to show and stuff like it. It really forced everybody to be like, why am I getting this? Okay, I'll put an SSL on there. So
yeah,
like every site pretty much has an SSL, and if you don't have an SSL, it's basically because you've put up a site maybe on your own and you don't know,
yeah,
um, and you think, well, I don't have anything secure, so like, why do I need to bother with this? But yeah,
yes. Famous last words.
yeah, yeah.
Uh, so, and I will say a big shout out to Electronic Frontier Foundation and Mozilla Foundation, who were instrumental in creating Let's Encrypt, which is the free service that they paired with Google to then get it for everyone. So, big shout outs to them to thinking about the end user and getting this free service that everyone can use to generate SSL certificates, because it used to be a big money maker for, not a big money maker, but it was still like, they charge you $100 to do it. And
Oh
uh,
man, I remember back when I first started, we did SSL. So they were SSL certificates were like $300 to $500. Like they
yeah,
were expensive.
yeah, and for something that generally is like not like there's a reason why Mozilla and EFF were able to do it for free, and it was because it actually wasn't that as complicated. If you just ran this, like you had a special server and it ran like a hashing code for you, and then
Yeah.
so it's definitely, yeah, it's, we're living in a much more secure landscape than I think we've ever have, which is good for most end users, that it's super easy for you to secure your website by just doing some basic, basic steps. So I think that that's in 2024 to have it a much better frontier for all these things, I think is good for average people that are starting a website and getting out there.
hmm and on top of having the SSL, make sure it's enforced. Like, don't because there are some sites that have SSLs, but you can still go to the non SSL.
Yeah,
So there's a way that you can force the loading of the SSL so that nobody can actually get to the non SSL version of your site.
yeah.
And I believe I can't remember the plugin name for that, but there is a plugin to do that.
Force
I'll try to.
HTTP Force HTTPS. I remember I did that. It was the
Is
plugin I
that what it's
used.
called? Yeah.
Yeah, and there's Force SSL as well. So there's like two.
Oh, yeah, maybe it might be Force SSL that I was thinking, but there's probably a couple of them. But there are plugins that will do that for you. Again, if you go with these security plugins like Solid or WordFence, they have the option in there to easily turn the
Yeah.
the auto SSL or the Force SSL on. Some of the other things that you'll find in the additional stuff that you'll find in these plugins is things like scanning, periodic scans of your site. You'll be able to set that kind of stuff up.
Mm-hmm.
You can set up firewalls to
Mm-hmm.
ban IPs and things like that. Obviously, the network brute force, which we talked about, could be set up.
Yeah.
Um, and there are I think I mentioned some of these already, but some of the system tweaks, um, aside from hardening your some of the important files, you can limit the fact that PHP can't be executed in certain directories, which is
Mm.
another big one because a lot of times when sites get hacked, PHP files get placed in random places where CSS is, or JavaScript files get placed in in certain places. So eliminating the ability for those files to even be able to execute in certain directories is another easy way to do set up some security.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. I think that that's a big one as well. Yeah, just make sure that it's limited in its scope and where it can act and where it can do certain things. I think is definitely a smart play.
Mm-hmm.
I had a deep and meaningful thought that has now evaded me. Well, obviously it wasn't that deep and meaningful, but I was thinking because the other one that we were talking about when we were starting this is like people who really should be concerned about like need to take the security the most serious. I think when we were talking was e-commerce companies. So that's
Mm-hmm.
very dangerous to not be secure in getting access to the back end because when I worked at Shopify, I saw someone who they were not very secure. Someone got a hold of their password and they went into their website, and the only thing they did was change the Stripe account number. And so the website was making money, but it wasn't making money for the store owner, and it just
Yeah,
went directly to whoever had hacked the website. Now I don't know what resulted in that part of it, but it's definitely simple changes like that can be huge impacts on your business because that's
for
anything that
sure.
involves money, anything that involves the payment to just kind of tweak it so it goes over to someone else's account. That's going to be huge, and so
Yeah, yeah.
definitely the one group of people who need to take this the most seriously are in e-commerce.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I feel like at the end of this, I'm thinking one of the topics I should have come up with to follow up on this was a topic of how to clean up or take care of a hacked site. I mean, might try
Mm,
to throw that in at some point because I think people would probably like to see or know about the basic things that you could, the steps you could take to unhack your site.
yeah, yeah,
Maybe.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
There's
the easiest way would be to have a backup plugin, and maybe we'll end on the backup note with this. Basically, there's a couple of backup plugins, and it's recommended to use a backup plugin to keep
yes.
backups of your site, because if something does happen and you have a backup, you could easily restore from a clean version of a backup to easily fix that whatever problem might have come up, whether it's the entire site or if it's only um, certain files or a certain plugin that went awry. Having backups of the entire thing to restore, or even just a small section,
Hmm.
is worthwhile. And that would be your easiest solution to a major hacked site, is to basically just pull one of your backups and throw it back in place, and then make sure you update and take care of whatever it was that was exploited so that it can't be done again.
Yeah, yeah. No, definitely big thumbs up for me for getting a backup plugin like Updraft is the one I use. Very
Mm-hmm.
simple to get started, very simple to get set up, and has saved my bacon more than a few times on when something goes, an update was not supposed to happen, or when it did happen, it broke everything. Stuff like that. Even if it's not necessarily a hacked website, but like you make a major change to the website, and then it turns out that it wasn't quite configured properly and the website's down, at least you can then revert back to one where it was working. And so that's definitely big recommendation on my part for security, because even if like I don't know, you lose control of your hosting or whatever, then at least like you have the files, you can go to start a new account, get it up, reconnect the domain. At least you have the ability to get back up relatively quickly. You may be
Yeah.
down for a day, but at least like you have something to work with where you're not completely hosed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like you say, it's one thing to have a backup plugin and backups being created. It's another thing to make sure you're storing those backups offsite, because in that situation you just came up with, if you lost access to the server, or the server went away completely, and you were storing backups on that server, oh, your backups are gone too. So you're still out of
Yeah.
luck.
Yeah.
So the importance of storing the backups offsite is important for sure.
Yeah, and like when I do Updraft, I just connect it to my Google Drive account, and
Mm.
it's like a couple gigs that are sitting on there. But because most websites aren't really that big, and then yeah, it's super easy, and you've got Google again going back to they're super secure, you know, and so you know that Google's not going away. And then if anything does happen for your server instance, then you just switch over to a new one and then load it in, and then point the domain there. Boom, you're ready to go. And so it's definitely yeah, another aspect of security that backing up and updating things is kind of the I'd say the TLDR of this whole thing was just make sure you have a backup and make sure everything's up to date.
Yeah. Well, that was everything. So we got through it
Yeah,
all. That's
yeah,
pretty nice.
yeah. I I was a little surprised that we managed to cover so much ground. And the question, of course, because I was so prepared, what are we doing next?
Yeah, good
Uh,
question.
uh, AI for your marketing. What are you doing?
Mm. Mm.
And that's going to be with myself and Pip.
Cool. Look
Uh,
forward to that.
yeah, it should be very interesting. Um, and so yeah, and then we will see you guys then. Find us in Cyberpunk Marketing Mixer group if you have any more questions. Want to continue the conversation. My name is Phelan.
And I'm Greg. Thanks for joining us.
Bye.